We're gonna talk about Kazuha real quick for the weapon tier list, okay? So this video is gonna go over two different possible builds for Kazuha. The first build that we're gonna talk about is gonna be a main DPS build where you're basically just going mad lad on any content, whatever, just trying to boost out Kazuha's damage, while also when you switch to other characters in your team, boosting them in some type of way. That is a main DPS Kazuha build. It allows you to use your elemental skill and plunge attacks to get lots of damage, using elemental burst to do damage, and gets you mad lad overall damage. The second build is a support build that's just basically fully built to support your entire team in some way, whether it be through energy, battery, or through increasing your damage on your team. Those are the two types of builds we'll be going over in this video, and they're going to be we're going to be going over the weapons that are both going to correspond to these types of builds and how they rank against other weapons. Let's jump into it. Okay, so I took some of your feedback from my previous video regarding weapon tier list for the EULA weapon tier list that we did a while ago, and we went over some of the things. A lot of you guys didn't like that I rated damage weapons that also increased your damage, increased damage taken, and survivability weapons at lower ranks, because by doing that you didn't really feel like it was representing the weapon well enough. And a few of you guys didn't like that I wasn't going through the weapons and using them uniquely for the characters, and you said that you didn't like that I was rating these on different tier ranks based upon them being better on other characters. Now, some characters, of course, are going to be better with these weapons, and weapon optimization is really a problem for a lot of free-to-play players, and not being able to use multiple characters with the same weapon is a problem. So that's why it does play a factor into this, but it's not going to be a big weighted factor in this video. So I do read my comments, so thank you. Okay, so we've constructed a weapon tier list for Kazuha. Kazuha, I've tried out with a lot of different weapons on my account, and we've tried it with Blacklift, my other account. I have tried it with everything but pretty much Alley Flash and Flute, and the last one I haven't tried is Lion's Roar, but I can extrapolate based on data on other characters, and I will of course put that in here based on what I think here. I haven't tried the J Cutter, but it's gonna be good. So for the trash tier, we have the 3-star weapons of Justice, all at Refined 0. None of them are very good. Of course, you should not use 3-star weapons at Refined 0. It is a bad plan. Okay, moving up to the Copium tier. These are weapons that are pretty good, but literally are just good because you don't have anything else, and they're just there as a spot holder until you get something better. First up, we got Royal Sword, the Prototype Rancor, the Festering Desire at Refined 1. We got the Skyward, what's it called? Something like that. Flute, and Sacrificial Sword. Now, the problem with Festering at R1 is if you're using a Festering Desire at Refine 1, it has literally like very, very low elemental skill damage increase and elemental crit damage increase, so you really don't get much out of it there. For a Sacrificial Sword, at Refine 1, I don't think this is going to be really good, because if you're looking at a Sacrificial Sword, let's see if we can find it on this list here. I have like a bunch of Sacrificial Sword at Refine 1 is on a 30-second cooldown, whereas at Refine 5, it's on a 16-second cooldown. So that means between Refine 1 and Refine 5, you can get the Sacrificial proc way more often on a Refine 5, and especially since Kazuha's cooldown is so freaking fast that this at higher refines is way better than it is at lower refine, and it's not good on him at all, really, for Refine 0. But the double E proc is really cool, and I've done it, and I'll show it here, but it's definitely not good at Refine 0 or Refine 1 or whatever. We got the Skyrider Greatsword over here at R5. Really not a great option. Increasing attack percentage, movement speed is cool, but it's really not necessary. The Flute is not really a great option because of a physical damage proc, really not a positive option. And over here we have the Harbinger of the Dawn. Now, I didn't test Harbinger of the Dawn yet. I'll probably test it in just a moment here. But the base attack of this weapon being extremely low lowers the damage significantly, and you're probably going to get hit on Kazu while you're flying in the air, so which means you're going to get below the 90% threshold. Every time I do a plunge at Kazu, there's usually like a crystal fly or some bullshit that hits me. Usually, if you play Zhao, you understand when you're in the air, you get hit regardless of like you trying to dodge or not. So you do get hit, and it will lower your HP below the 90% threshold, so probably not the best option. And then this defense Copium weapon is also trash. Okay, moving up to next tier. These weapons are all decent, but none of them are all insane. None of them are really top tier. They're definitely all good to use on Kazuha, and they're all good for different reasons. And first thing I'm going to go over is going to be this one. It's just going to be the Skyward Blade. So the Skyward Blade is a weapon with energy recharge on the main stat. This weapon in particular is probably one of those weapons that I just don't find to be very good for Kazuha in general because it increases movement speed and attack speed. Now, the thing with attack speed on Kazuha, it's not really useful for him unless you're at Constellation 6. Then there's an argument that this weapon's actually good. But for the purpose of this video, for most players that are going to be looking for a weapon, at a Constellation 0 Kazuha, not a Constellation 6 Kazuha, this weapon is kind of sus. It could move up a tier if you were at Constellation 6 Kazuha, and the reason that matters, of course, is because Constellation 6 Kazuha makes it so that you can have normal and charge attacks that are going to be infused with Animo after you use abilities, so there's an argument for that. The ER in this weapon and the mid-range base attack make it okay, but I really don't find the weapon to be super helpful for Kazuha, and the damage test we did for the weapon showed that it was decent, but definitely not like the best freaking weapon since sliced bread. It's definitely an okay weapon for him, so if you're looking for an ER battery weapon that's going to help your Kazuha for energy and do damage, it's okay. Definitely not insane though, and definitely wouldn't use it at Refined 5 or go for a Refined 5 weapon in general for this character anyways. Next up, we have this one weapon. Do I have the Dark Iron Sword on this account? I don't know if I do. I don't have the Dark Iron on this account. So the Dark Iron Sword, let's see if I can pull up this weapon here is a 3-star weapon that you can't get at Refined 5. It actually is only available at Refined 1 as a secret weapon. And if you're just starting out in Genshin Impact and you don't have any weapons and you don't have any 4-star weapons, this is probably the best 3-star option because it's an Elementary Mastery main stat weapon that at level 90 caps out at 141 Elemental Mastery, which is pretty decent. It's definitely something you can use while you wait for a better weapon. And as far as like early game weapons go, it's decent. So I won't let you know that it's like an SS tier weapon or anything like that, but it's definitely the best 3-star weapon out there for him. And if you could refine this weapon, it would definitely be even better. Next up, we have Lion's Roar. So Lion's Roar, because you're going to be swirling a lot of elements all the time, and enemies are going to be infused with Pyro or Electro if you're swirling out those characters, this is actually a really interesting weapon. I haven't got to test this yet, but I can clearly see after playing Kazuha for about 6, 7, 8 hours that this weapon will be very good for Kazuha as far as a DPS build Kazuha. Black Sword and Black Cliff Sword are both really fun to use. I've used them on my Asia server account, and they are both exceptional weapons. I don't see any issues with either of those weapons. This weapon only having normal and charge attack boost is not really super big issue. The crit chance main stat and the crit damage main stat for these weapons just make them very good in general. So even though the passives aren't as good, they're definitely decent weapons. Okay. Next up, we have the R5 Alley Flash, or R1 Alley Flash. This weapon is really good in comparison to the Iron Sting. For a DPS Kazuha build, this weapon is probably the highest damage 4-star weapon out there for the overall damage for your kit, but seeing it has a very low Elemental Mastery main stat, the swirl damage that you get and the elemental damage transfer that you get for other people in your team for any type of support you're doing is actually be much lower, so your overall damage might be hindered because of that. I can't test it because I don't have weapon materials to test every single weapon in the game, but I did test Iron Sting on both of my accounts, and I tend to tell you that Iron Sting can be used at Refine 1 or Refine 5 for a support build. And as for a damage build, you definitely need Refine 5 for a damage build, but Refine 1 is okay for a fully support build. You're not going to see massive gains on any support build for this. So it's definitely all up there for these weapons. They're all very good weapons. Now, the one weapon that I think is very interesting, and I think it's going to be a very good weapon for Kazuha, for a lot of players that end up just randomly picking him up, but don't have any other weapons, don't have any craftable or prototype materials, but end up having this weapon already leveled or just in their box at Refine 1 or Refine 5 or whatever it may be, is the Favonius Sword. So Favonius Sword is an amazing weapon for Kazuha, and the reason it's so good is because the amount of battery Kazuha actually provides to your team is exceptional. He's one of the best battery units that I've seen in Genshin Impact, and the fact that you can use a Favonius Sword on top of his to give your any character more energy is super great. You can actually use a plunge attack following your elemental skill and getting crits on doing that, and make it so that you can transfer all of that energy that you get after your plunge to the next character and get all the energy on one character. It's a very large amount of energy you get from one character on a 6-second cooldown. But seeing how the Favonius Sword is on a 12-second cooldown at Refine 1, it's definitely decent, but definitely not the best option. But at Refine 5, since it's on a 6-second cooldown, it's much better. Next, we have the Summit Shaper. This is a weapon that requires a shield, and I really don't find it to be very good for Kazuha because it kind of limits your options. And seeing how Kazuha is better in more elemental teams and less Geo on the team, which I have tried, I definitely don't think Summit Shaper is probably the way to go unless you're using a Diona with your Kazuha, in which case it's probably going to be a really good weapon. But at lower refines, probably not the best choice. It'll definitely be good for a 5-star DPS weapon, definitely not the best choice, and I wouldn't put it on par with like Jade Cutter or anything like that. It might even have the higher damage end for like the big top end hits, but you're gonna lose out on a lot of other parts of your damage for your kit. So I really don't think it's gonna be super viable, because you're gonna have less crit and crit chance, crit damage, because you're gonna be building so hard in EM. Getting those crits is gonna happen a lot less often, and having attack percentage as a main stat is really just not valuable for a character that scales off of EM. Then we have Aquila Favonia R1. I did testing on this weapon, and I can say that this weapon is pretty much equivalent to, I would say, an R1 Iron Sting. It's much, the total damage that you get from this weapon is equivalent to an R5 Iron Sting, but as far as like the value that you provide to your team, because you're doing less damage transfer with his actual passive, this weapon is less good because it's going to provide less value than an R1 Iron Sting. I did try it. I kind of liked it. The damage for the Animo hits was high, but the swirl hits were lower, and then the damage transfer was of course lower because of that. So I think the overall damage that you got is probably not great for Kazuha. Of course, it's a physical damage weapon, so probably not the best way to go. Next, you have Festering Desire. This weapon is cool. I like it. It's easy, free to play. If you have it, it's great. No problems with it. I think it's a decent weapon. It's a good option, but it's better on Bennett, obviously. So like, it's kind of like a hard choice to say that you should use this weapon for him. It definitely does decent damage. Good for energy recharge. The elemental skill does good damage, but like the plunge attack that you do following the elemental skill is pretty low. So that's the problem with this weapon, is that you don't actually do a large amount of damage on the plunge, and your ultimate ability is pretty lackluster, even though you need to get it up a little bit more often. Of course, we got down here the Royal Sword R5, which is shit for every character in the game because of how scaling works in the game. And then we have the Cool Steel. Cool Steel is very similar to Lion's Roar, so the idea of being able to use it like the Lion's Roar is also pretty good, so that's why Cool Steel is here. And then, of course, we have R5, what's it called? Prototype Rancor. I could put this down here, I could put this here. It really doesn't matter. This weapon's like a little bit better here, so it's decent at R5, but like R1 it's not so much because of the attack percentage defense percentage increase that you get on the procs. But I don't know how often you get the procs up. And if you're building a Fizz Kazuha, maybe, but like it's pretty copium. It's not it could even be here. I mean, it's just whatever. All right, now we're gonna move up to the really good weapons tier. So these weapons are what you really want for Kazuha. This is where your end goal is for Kazuha, and this is what you would want, okay? Most of the time, this is going to be impossible for literally everyone, okay? Summit Shaper R5, you just want to dump for your Summit Shaper, it's good, but like it's not going to be as good as the other ones. So we got Jade Cutter and the Freedom Sword are the best two options by far for any person in the game. I'd say the Alley Flash R5 is probably on par with an Iron Sting R5. I haven't actually tested on the Iron Sting, but I can see the numbers from other weapons and kind of extrapolate how that's going to work out. So I'd say this is going to be higher damage, lower damage transfer, but definitely better than the Aquila Favonia. But the Aquila Favonia on what's it called? On the refines will actually get an additional 40% attack increase versus the 20%. So it's a little bit more damage. Plus the proc will go up by a total of 160%. So you do get a lot more damage on the proc for the Aquila Favonia. So that might, put it a little bit above the damage here, but probably not that much. I have tested extensively on the Black Sword R5. I really like the Black Sword R5 on Kazuha. It was really cool, and I definitely think that if you're using for constellations, it's a huge pickup. I don't think it's going to be the best weapon, but I definitely think it's like on par with Blackcliff Sword and Iron Sting R5, just for like crit builds and stuff. These two weapons for the crit build weapons are definitely the more fun weapons for Kazuha. The weapon I really want to build out though, and I'm actually kind of really curious about, is the Lion's Roar. And the reason I'm so curious about the Lion's Roar is because of the damage percentage increase from Lion's Roar at 36% is higher than that of what you can get here. And the thing that makes the Freedom Sword so good is the passive on the Freedom Sword is actually a 10% increased damage passive. And because you get that 10% increased damage passive along with all the EM and the high base attack, you're getting a huge amount of damage. Now what I've noticed is that this, because it'll have a 36% damage increase from either Pyro or Electro, you can actually get some huge damage gains for using this with Bennett or other characters. So I can definitely see the Lion's Roar being a really good option for Kazuha. And the attack percentage main stat kind of might hold you back a little bit but since there's a damage percentage increase versus like an attack percentage increase over here, you can definitely see some gains from there. Now, R5 Favonius is definitely the best overall battery weapon for Kazuha because you can actually transfer to Kazuha every 6 seconds because of a 6-second cooldown, and the Favonius being on a 6-second cooldown, it's an exceptional weapon for battery Kazuha, and that's probably the best way to go if you're looking for a huge battery. He's definitely an exceptional battery. And as for Sacrificial Sword, I kind of like Sacrificial Sword. It's fun and very cool, but the problem with it, of course, it's the best in slot weapon for Shinku. So I really don't want to transfer it off of him for any reason whatsoever, because he'd be using Shinku on too many other teams, and there's too many other reasons to use the Sacrificial Sword on other characters. So I would say that this is not the way to go for him just for that reason. But otherwise, it's really good and really fun if you just wanted to use that for that reason. All right, so obviously the Whale's Wet Dream is going to have R5 on the Freedom Sword and the Jade Cutter, both of which pretty equivalent. One's for a DPS build, one's for like either a balance build or a DPS build for energy transfer. I think they're pretty equivalent as far as like what you could really get out of them. One might have higher top end, one might more energy elemental transfer, but they're pretty much equivalent between the two weapons as far as what you would get overall between them. Damage wise, I think of course Jade Cutter is better, and I think that for damage transfer for overall team compositions, the way Kazuha works, this is going to be better. But I think this will be a better weapon overall, just in general, but Jade Cutter is going to be way more fun. And of course, the best weapon in the game for Kazuha is the Fillet Blade. It's clearly the best option. It was shown in the trailer. It looks the best. It has clearly the best aesthetic because it is the only weapon that even close to a Samurai Sword in Genshin Impact. And I'm not really sure why Fillet Blade is not a 6-star. So again, I would just re-roll your entire account for Fillet Blade. All right, guys, well, that's going to do it for this video. My name's Sekapoko. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did enjoy the video, of course, like, subscribe, all the fun stuff. And you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.